That's how I feel. I feel like I'm gonna take off. I'm gonna take off like a stick of dynamite.
I want to be wealthy. If not wealthy, content, comfortable. You know? I want to be somebody.
Drag and ballroom, the expression of queer fluidity of black people through dance, music, and makeup. Dating back to the early 20th century, including many different sections of the world like Mexico and Berlin. Drag has been an influential part of pop culture and been the catalyst for many famous artists' aesthetics and creativity, such as Madonna, Lady Gaga, and many more. Queer people all over the world have been inspired by drag and ballroom through their own discoveries. For many years, drag queens have tried to understand what it truly means to be a phenomenal drag queen. Daniel Harris, who wrote The Aesthetic of Drag, said that drag will be considered a laughable hoax for Halloween. Queens started off having to go through harsh criticism on their own choice of lifestyle. Society viewed them as men who dressed in women's clothing but will never be taken seriously as a woman. During this time, drag has been mistranslated for transvestism, the practice of dressing in a manner traditionally associated with the opposite sex. Basically stating that drag is something you cannot do professionally, rather than living as an opposite gender for everyday life. Clothing, which is an important part of drag, which helps understand different time periods of drag and the amount of creativity flowing during that time. Clothing either helped with understanding what part of the world people were in. For instance, Berlin, being one of the most known international places for drag, was known to try and impersonate their drag from pop icons from that specific time period, such as Madonna and Marilyn Monroe. Even in the early 20th century, many drag queens would dress up like extravagant versions of the woman they would see in their day-to-day life. Furthermore, this has everything to do with the over-the-top makeup, outfit, and hair. However, drag had to move with the times and trending events, so drag started to shift more into androgynous clothing and less feminine aesthetics were being shunned. As time moved on, drag became less circulated around the center stage into more local neighborhoods and nightlife scene. This was also the effect of drag not having a good image with cisgender women who saw drag queens as mockers. The gaze that drag queens got was not just from men, but from women, specifically heterosexual women, who sort of were confused and misinformed on the principle of drag. Soon after this slight downfall, drag went back to the roots of being more extravagant and feminine. Specifically, during the 60s, when black queer people were often shown in the media because of the civil rights movement, Stonewall, and freedom fighters, drag quickly shifted again when black drag queens wanted to embrace their masculinity more while being in drag. This caused the world of drag to be considered an embarrassment. Gay liberations also made more problematic by masculinizing the subculture, effeminate mannerisms. And because of this new form of masculinity, it was considered in effect to sabotage the transformative illusion of drag. Referring to earlier statements, drag seemed as though the scene no longer wanted to reinforce cultural stereotypes of femininity, but blending the lines between homosexuals and transsexuals. Although there were queens out there who have been considered too masculine than a person in drag should have, many others continued the feminine approach. However, in the 80s and 90s, drag took a big shift because many were bored of being viewed as impersonators and decided to create their own new approach on drag and revamp their own style.
Men gather together under one roof and decide to have a competition amongst themselves.
Ballroom, where many black and Latinx people would throw extravagant balls to perform, vogue, pose, and model. New York during these times was the new home of drag, and New York in itself was its own way of living. Black drag queens had to make a living of their own on the streets and have to try and survive just to make it to the next day. With having to make their own wardrobe and whole personas, this called drag queens in today's age to be less original and more like impersonators instead of their own person. Lady Bunny, a famous drag queen in the 80s, explained that many drag queens were in poverty and didn't have much money for shelter or basic necessities. She stated that being in poor conditions made room for more expression and creativity, which was shown a lot in the 90s. As she stated, being in lower income conditions did cause for many queens to try and become more creative in their personas and be more original what they can afford. Black people, specifically black men, have been shunned by their femininity side, but being in this scene lets them be who they fantasize about, such as military men, school kids, businessmen, and many more. While white people seem to be the only ones who were able to have these working class jobs, but during these balls, the categories were exclusive for everyone. A drag mother, Pepper LaBeija, stated, "The balls to us is as close to reality as we're going to get to all the fame and fortune and stardom and spotlights." The 80s and 90s were a time for black queer people to truly thrive and express themselves in so many ways. This is where ballrooms come into the entertainment culture, specifically for black people who were not totally interested in drag, but wanted to express themselves still in a feminine way. These balls opened the gate for many queens such as Willie Ninja and Octavia St. Laurent in the community to get involved in modeling, dancing, and music videos. Again, drag was starting to be incorporated in pop culture with the dancing, slang, and even voguing. Pop artist Madonna has used voguing in her music videos before voguing became mainstream, which helped jumpstart the acknowledgement of ballroom. There was such a bigger impact of drag in ballroom than most think, down to the slang that is heavily used in the LGBTQ community that originated in these balls. Everyone loves to throw shade, read, vogue, and dip all day. There was a lack of recognition to the black queer community based on the fact that pop culture is consistently evolving, all because of the evolution of ball and drag. It is futuristic and power lies in the ability to evolve while still maintaining its roots. Drag and ballroom culture have been consistently shifting, but there is a significant ambiance of unity, power, and respect.